Admittedly, I am torn between like 3 different subjects, so you have to bear with me. I didn't really grow up in a church or in a religious sort of setting. My parents kind of were they're kind of like whatever, like they really weren't. Well, I guess my mom, she took me to a Catholic church for the first couple of years, and then we stopped going to that. And for a while, we didn't really go anywhere. Now, I didn't really know what to believe or anything. And eventually in high school, one of my friends took me to their church, and I was like, okay, whatever, I'll go along with you guys, and I'll see what this Bible thing's all about. And wow, that was a joke, because I went there and man, they were acting weird, and it was like really way too happy and then way too emotional. I just was not feeling what they were feeling. Like I just simply wasn't. And their whole thing was like, they gave some moving message, and I mean, I guess it kind of felt good, but I just did not like it at all. And there wasn't really much rational with what I was hearing there. I was probably like, I don't know, maybe 16 or so, and I could tell that this is full of nonsense. Okay. And so I just faked it for a little bit, and then I left, and I was like, I don't know, I'm kind of turned off at this point. And kind of at that point, I would say that's when I was really, really thinking that I think anything in the Bible or anything about Christianity is just wrong. Because from that point on, all the experience I had had with Christian people was either overly emotional or overly judgmental, and really not a lot of reason behind it. So why would I believe in this thing that there's really not that much to back it up? Yeah, fine. It makes my friends feel better. Good for them. For me, I'm looking for some real answers. Okay. And I've looked at, like, I've heard some different churches, how they do things. And like, there's just so many churches out there. There's like hundreds of them. And they all do all their weird little things. Like I got other friends that go to this place called a Pentecostal church, and they speak in like, they think they're talking from God. I think it's just gibberish. Okay, but they don't like to hear anything reasonable or logical or anything like that. Some other people I know, they go to some huge like mega church thing, and it's just, I don't get it. Okay, I mean, I was in Toledo the other day, and I looked over and I was passing by this old theater, and it was a big cinema, and it was a church, and it just, stuff like that really convinces me that anything dealing with Christianity is just, it can't be true, because look at all this marketing that's going on. It's clearly just for the money. And I got my questions for Christians. I got a lot of them, and I never get good answers to them. I don't get them. For example, there's all these contradictions in the Bible. There's tons of them. And whenever I point them out to any religious person, they just get upset. They don't have really good answers. They almost overlook it. And I cannot, as an intellectual person, just look past that. I can't just ignore that and just believe in something just for no real reason. In school, they taught me this thing called evolution. And yeah, I think the idea has some holes in it. Things are lacking. But I think it makes a whole lot more sense than just automatically assuming that some random God made everything and that everything the Bible says is true. See, that's something I notice that Christians like to do, is when they're trying to prove their faith, what they do is they tear apart evolution and then somehow jump that all the way to mean that everything that the Bible says is true. And that is not a reasonable that's not a reasonable conclusion. Okay. at most, the best you could get is to say that maybe there's some kind of God out there. That doesn't mean that the Bible, everything the Bible says is true. Okay, but a lot of Christians, they don't get that. Like you type in internet, like proof that the Bible's the word of God. A lot of it's that, or here's another thing, it's philosophy. Okay, there's a lot of philosophical ranting that goes on between Christians like online, and really they're trying to find some way of explaining why they think God exists. Okay, and a lot of it's just a bunch of circular reasoning. For example, and I could hardly understand some of this reasoning, but one explanation is that, well, the universe had a cause, so that cause must have been God. Okay, well, I understand that yeah, we don't understand what caused the universe, but that doesn't mean God did it, and that certainly doesn't mean that the Bible is inspired by God, right? Okay, but people don't seem to understand that is there's still a gap there. Okay, there's a little phrase I like called the God of the gaps. In other words, what a lot of religious people do is they don't understand something, therefore God did it. Okay, and then even worse, therefore the Bible's inspired. And I cannot jump on board with something like that. But like I said, I can't really get any good answers from anyone. So as I just live my life, I mean, I'll try and be a good person, all that stuff, but until I get something more solid, then I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and live my life. Okay. See, there's a real importance for us as Christians to know how to talk to someone who's a true seeker, but also a skeptic. I kind of gave a narration of some of the different points of view that I've heard from people who are skeptics. Something that would be good for you guys to do if you haven't done this before is if you go on YouTube, just type in why I'm not a Christian or my deconversion from Christianity. And you'll get a lot of different videos of people giving like their 5-minute explanation of why they are no longer a Christian or why they don't believe the Bible, or on and on and on. And some of those people, they really don't have anything worth saying, but some of those people actually have really legitimate points. They really have real questions. And if you can listen to these narrations, if you listen to them on YouTube, and actually try and understand, where is this person coming from? What are they really thinking? Don't just immediately assume, well, they're wrong, I'm right, forget this. Okay, actually think, what is these people's point of view? You'll find that a lot of them, they just simply have questions that they don't get answers to. And unfortunately, the religious world, the majority of the religious world does not have the answers to a lot of these questions. And really, it does come down to the church to provide these real answers to these questions, okay? And if you're not able to just have an honest, calm conversation with someone who is a skeptic, you're not going to be able to get to them, okay? So it's really important that you know how to answer different questions that someone might bring up. For example, I mentioned the contradictions thing. If you go online and you type in Bible contradictions, you're going to get websites that come up saying there's 1,000 contradictions in the Bible and hundreds of contradictions. Okay, they're all over. Okay, first thing you need to point out is that if there's a supposed error in the Bible, if there's another way of explaining that error, then it's not an error. If there's a supposed contradiction that says one thing, but you can give a different approach to that contradiction that explains it, then it's no longer a contradiction. And I find that by just pointing that out to people, it helps them to realize that, hey, there might be other answers to this thing. Maybe some of you have experienced it, like as a young Christian. You may have thought that, oh yeah, everything's good, I believe in the Bible and all that stuff, and then someone asks you a question and it sounds like a really good question, and you start wondering. Okay, I had one of those experiences once where in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 1 through 3. Actually, 1 through 4. I'll just read. It says, "Now I make known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, in which also you stand, by which also you are saved, if you hold fast the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures." Now, here's an example of a question that someone might come up with, because here it's saying that according to the scriptures that Christ raised on the third day. Now, there's no place in the Bible where it says or prophesies that Jesus will raise on the third day. Okay? It's not in there. So why is it in 1 Corinthians it says that the Bible says that when it doesn't actually say that? That's an error in the Bible. Okay? And stuff like that can really get to you if you don't know what the answer is. It should get to you. Okay? If someone asks you a question that you guys, seriously, someone asks you a question and it really seems like there's a problem with the Bible, that should bother you. Because you're all truth seekers, right? You want real answers, right? You don't look past, you don't just overlook problems, right? Right? And that got to me, okay? Now, just some brief little research, you find that actually here it says that it's according to the scriptures, okay? There are at least two places in the Bible where it does tell you that Jesus was raised on the third day. Anyone name those two? Anyone have any idea? I know someone's got to know. Okay. Abraham's son, there was a 3-day journey before he was going to sacrifice his son. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay. Now, those two places this kind of is another interesting topic. Those two places are what you would call foreshadow or symbolism in the Bible. Okay, they aren't necessarily like a straightforward prophecy where a prophet writes down this is going to happen, but they still are a type of prophecy because instead of writing down what's going to happen, you act out what's going to happen. It's a form of prophecy, and it's all over in the Bible. So actually, there's no contradiction at all. You just have to understand that there are events in the Old Testament which foreshadow things, and that counts. Okay. Now that's a whole nother interesting topic. I've noticed that if you look online for like evidence of the Bible's Word of God or whatever, stuff like that, virtually nobody points out or uses foreshadow to prove that the Bible's the Word of God. It's amazing. When they talk about, when different sources online or different books or whatever, different writers talk about proof that the Bible's the Word of God, they usually just focus on like Isaiah 53, like the commonly known messianic prophecies, or they might talk about like the fall of Babylon, but really very few of them seem to understand that you can actually use foreshadow in the Bible to prove that it's inspired by God. It's like they don't realize that because it's not written, it's like they think that because it's not written, it's not really good proof, but it's perfectly legitimate. You look at all the foreshadows of the Old Testament, like the Hebrew, the Old Testament, all the foreshadowing in there with the temple, with the priesthood, on and on. I won't go into depth with all that stuff. All that is foreshadow for the Bible, but for some reason, a lot of people, if they're outside of, we'll just say the churches of Christ, they don't seem to realize that you can use all that stuff. Okay, but anyways, that's kind of a tangent. What I pointed out is an example of a really good question that someone can ask, and a lot of people don't have a good answer to that stuff. See if I can think of other issues. I mentioned something about philosophy earlier. I noticed that a lot of people seem to just stick on philosophy to try and prove that God exists. Here's a newsflash. You cannot prove that God exists simply from philosophy, okay? Because all you're doing is you're trying to find some reason of thought that makes you think that God exists. But the bottom line is, from a purely intellectual, just straightforward scientific approach, you don't know what caused the universe to exist. You just know something caused it. You don't know it's the God of the Bible. You don't know if it's some Hindu god. You don't know if it was just some kind of a material sort of thing that existed before. You don't actually know. It's not until you actually look at the design of everything that's around us. It's not until you compare like a bird to an airplane, or flowers to flowers to a vase. You know, it's not until you compare like man-made machines to living things that you start to realize that there's a lot of design around us, which tells you that which tells you that whatever caused the universe to exist was also intelligent. And now you know that there's some kind of a God out there. And if you understand that God exists, then it's really just a matter of trying to figure out which religion is his religion, or which book is inspired by God, in which you just turn to different prophecy and foreshadow, and you can prove that the Bible's inspired. It's actually not that complicating, but for some reason, people they don't know the answers to that stuff, and people in the religious world don't even have good answers. Okay, so that puts a lot more responsibility on people like us who do have good answers. Another issue that might come up that I've seen that gets to a lot of people is, like, for us, we understand that different denominations out there aren't the true church. Okay, we understand that, but for someone who is a skeptic, someone who is outside the church, they look at all that as the same thing. The Pentecostals, the Catholics, Church of Christ, all that is all Christianity. So you end up, when you understand that, then you realize that a lot of the confusion is simply because someone has an issue with a church that is not the New Testament church. So you're constantly having to kind of explain why this thing or this problem that you have with Christianity is actually a legitimate issue, but at the same time, that's with the Catholic Church and that with the Bible. I don't know if you all are following me. I'll give you an example with the Crusades. Okay, some people, including myself, had a problem with Christianity at first because, look at the Crusades, all the evil that was done with that. If Christianity and the Bible was such a legitimate religion, if that was God's religion, why are the Crusades there? Because it's clearly just a bunch of greed in there. Okay, legitimate issue, right? Now you have to explain to someone that actually you're completely right with that, except for one thing. That's the Catholic Church, not the Church of the New Testament. So that simply shows that the Catholic Church has its issues, but not necessarily the Bible, because the Bible doesn't teach that you should have crusades, you should have wars and all that. So you have to be able to explain that kind of thing to people who are outside of Christ. You have to understand where they're coming from. Don't just get upset because, oh man, they said something against, they had something against what I believe, and then now I'm upset because I don't really know the answer. You don't want to be that way. You want to be able to understand what is it that they're actually thinking, and then actually give them like a smart answer to it. Preferably a quick, short answer, because it's just easier if you give a quick, shorter answer, and then if they want to really talk about it, then you can talk about it. But I personally think that if you just give someone a short, concise answer, it just makes a whole lot more sense. It's less complicating. It's just shoot straight, okay? So, anyone got any comments or anything at this point? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I think that's really a good point, concise answer, because if somebody has a question, generally, if you have a good enough relationship, they'll ask it. Sometimes we can leave ourselves into a corner by just too much information. And so we don't want to overwhelm people, but we do want to answer their question. So let them ask the follow-up question instead of trying to go on with a diatribe if you're already explaining it.
Yes, that's a good point. I personally, when I'm talking to someone and I ask them a question, I really get frustrated when I ask a question that really I'm just looking for a simple answer, but then they go into like a 30-minute dissertation on all the different ins and outs, and really all I wanted was a quick answer. Okay, so you got to think about that. You know, are you actually talking more than you're listening? You know, just something you have to be aware of. And I know in the past when I've talked with people, I tended towards talking more because I was just excited or whatever, and not so much listening. Okay, so you can get really far with someone if you just listen to what they have to say and actually see what are they really asking, what issue do they really have. Any other comments? Yes, Bill.
I remember the morning that you called.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. Of course I do.
And, you know, in reference to getting answers to your question, I answered the phone when you called. And it kind of, when you're asked, I believe you asked, what do you believe?
Something
And
like that.
It's hard to condense that thought into a short, you know, so that answer is, well, we believe what the Bible says. Which, if someone doesn't understand, or if they're coming out, like you said, coming out of a Catholic church or Pentecostal or whatever, that can be confusing for somebody just to say we believe what the Bible says, because Catholics believe that they believe what the Bible says too. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's hard to condense a simple question like, what do you believe, into a short answer.
Yeah, I understand. Some things are just, it opens up a whole can of worms.
But a 30-minute rant that doesn't get to a point is another
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, there are some things that definitely, like, there's more to talk about than just a one phrase answer. For example.
That's why I said, you know, talk to Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, if someone asks you to prove to them that the Bible is the Word of God in one sentence, you can't do it. Okay, it's not going to happen. You know, and even after that, like, it'd be like, they'd be like, you're just making that up. They wouldn't believe you anyways. So, yeah, I understand, Bill, that there's definitely that aspect in it. Yes? Yeah, a really long sentence. It could be. But I talk about this stuff a lot because I'm really convinced that there is we'll say a professional or godly way that you should talk to people about what you believe. I don't think it's overall complicating, but I think there's certain things to look at. For example, not getting defensive when you're being questioned. Okay, you don't want to be defensive when someone asks you hard questions, and it's okay to say you don't know the answer to something. Okay, a reasonable person will be okay if you say, I don't know the answer to your question, but I'll look it up. If they're reasonable, they should be okay with that. And if they're not reasonable, you're probably not going to get very far discipling them anyways. Okay.
And we shouldn't be afraid of getting in over our head, because, you know, just like Bill did, sometimes we do need to pass it off to somebody. And don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah.
You know, to expand that relationship, bring somebody else in temporarily to explain a point, you know, that you don't feel comfortable with. You know, everybody's at a different place. So sometimes I think we use the excuse, well, we don't know enough to talk to people. Well, number one, you know a lot more than you think you do. Because if you've been around here any amount of time, you know more than 98% of the denominational people in denominational churches. You just do. I mean, it's like being around the chalkboard. You're going to get some chalk on you know. And those things, if you do get snagged up, don't be afraid to ask for help. You know?
Yeah, it's good thoughts. I've also found that if you just ask questions, just honest questions to someone, they're fine with that. And you don't really need to know a whole lot to ask someone a question. Just ask them what they believe and why they believe it, and you already got a good start. You'll be surprised when you find that a lot of people don't really have a lot of foundation as to why they believe something. It's actually pretty amusing. It's pretty amusing. Any other comments from anyone? Okay. Well, I think my time is about up, roughly. So I'll just end it here if no one else has anything. Lord, thank you for this day that you blessed us with. Thank you for everyone that's been gathered here together. Thank you for all the blessings that that you've given us just